Uh, Good afternoon. Right, the
Vishal
outset.
sir, welcome and good afternoon, sir. I
I
welcome you all.
Yes,
Good
yes.
afternoon, Priyam. How are
Thank
you?
you so
I'm
much.
I'm good, sir. I'm good, sir.
Good.
Very good to see
So
all of you all.
I'm looking forward to the next 1.5 hours of a wonderful session. The timer has started. Digital dialogues. That's the topic today, and I have a great faculty with me: Palak, Samir, Viral, Anaga, Anant, and Anand. And we are going to see to it that we finish it in because basically everything is changing. And I remember a very famous quote by Jan Wurst. He said, "When technology is the master, you hit disaster faster." So we hope that we don't go to that. I will start the session with my talk. And where is my screen? My screen is. Where is the microscope? Yes. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So the talk is digital technology. I have my very esteemed colleagues who are going to talk on various aspects of digital technology. I'll just introduce this topic and then take you to the future of ophthalmology. And I don't have any financial interests. Why digital technology? Because digital technologies redefine operations, they redefine the processes in our day-to-day practice. It also leads to standardization of processes, and it gives you accuracy in your delivery. Automation reduces errors in execution, so we perform less errors. It increases your agility and your efficiency increases. You can do much more work if you're using technologies like digital. It has got minimal human intervention, so human error is reduced. And faster decision, less human errors make artificial intelligence as a continuous intelligence which we all should use. Just a small cartoon tell you that magic, we say, how does magic occurs? Magic occurs because we don't understand most of the things what magic is causing. So let's convert this magic into science. And I'm going to talk on following few topics, which is the future of surgery and robotics, drug delivery, gene replacement, implants, teleophthalmology, and AI and machine learning, because all these are digitally possible to improve your eye care. Now, we all know that this already is in vogue, that robotic eye surgery has reached the stage of human experiments. Already, patients have been operated for cataract surgeries under this. This is a particular thing where a vitrectomy module is being built up, where you use all this, and there is a cursor, or you are using a remote control to move all your equipment in very precise way. Because when you're working close to the retina, you know how precise it should be. The precision is up to 1 to 10 microns, so that kind of precision a human body cannot do. So that is where we use this robotic eye surgeries using digital platforms. And you can do lots of surgeries. I'll show you a couple of cartoons on this, how they are being useful. This is how you can do membrane peeling using a digital technology or digital precision. You're removing a membrane right on the surface of the retina. Here, the best thing is that a human error like a shake or like a tremor is taken care. You're very sure when you're holding like this particular thing, a very thin posterior highlight is being held, which is holding the retina, and you can just peel it without bothering, without your heartbeat disturbing your surgery. So this is what is important, that you have to understand that this is the future. People are going to use these technologies more and more. Another incidence where a 7 micron gas pipette is used to inject a drug in the vein. Now, all this is possible by robots. If I ask you to hold this needle, I think we'll have tremors. So this is where you see that this has been cannulated and a drug has been injected. So this is precision demonstration, which is possible. Robot surgery for cataracts has already been tried by Cambridge Group. They have this kind of two instruments, one holding the, whatever instrument you use on their left hand, and the right hand to hold your Pecos handpiece. And this is already done on humans. Surgeon is sitting and is only using a joystick. It is moving all these instruments. All this digital developments we're going to see in a couple of years, or maybe next decade will be a digital decade, where you can see that how precisely the movements are being controlled. The number of steps involved in moving a small movement are much more than muscles which you use. So this is where I think today's topic comes into foray. That this is it. Drug delivery again. It's just a small addition that we can use digital technologies where new drug molecules are being developed. And what this molecule does is, instead of drug being to be put every frequently or every 4 hours, you put drug once and it lasts for a week, because from a quick dissolve, the technology is taking us to a long dissolve through digital mechanisms. So these molecules will have, already a memory in it, that one drop will last for 1 week. So that is where it is. Gene replacement therapy is another very challenging thing, which that this is another great development in science because of digital development. You can pick up a genetic defect and you can pick up the protein which is abnormal. The abnormal protein can be removed by using a gene. A gene is replaced by injecting this gene through a adenovirus. So this adenovirus is injected directly intravitreally or subretinally, which I'm going to just show you a picture. Like for instance, in case of there is no protein and now this particular gene has DNA with mutated gene, a functional gene is injected, it goes and takes care of this defect which is present in this eye. And you use AAV via vectors, and they are injected. And how they are injected is very interesting thing, which I would like all of you to see, because it's a very simple virus. It doesn't affect the human beings, and it reaches the place where it is in. An example of achromatopsia. So intravitreally you can inject this, or you can inject it subretinally. Subretinally, directly where cones are there. So this gene reaching there stimulates the cones, so they start sending the impulses for color vision, and a person who has never seen colors in life can get advantage. Just to show you here, in without achromatopsia, normal receptors, normally the signals are going back to the cortex like this, and in achromatopsia you find that the signals are not going. If they are not going, what you can do, you can always inject with this, and this is all possible because of the digital platform. You must have heard about recently one child was injected with an 18 crore injection. Now, these are the things which are coming into vogue. The CNG-B3, CNG-A3 has come, and you inject directly there. And as soon as this reaches it, the dysfunctional cones become functional. And as you will see in the next cartoon, that this particular injection helps these cones to start sending the impulses into the retina or into the cortex. So artificial retina, all of you know that again is on the digital platform. You have these Argus 1, Argus 2, and all they are using digital arrays. These arrays are simulating. So if a person doesn't have a light perception, if you can start seeing movements, if you can start seeing all this due to the digital platforms, and these digital arrays are becoming more and more refined. They're becoming more and more sophisticated. This is a chip. The chip is installed and a person starts seeing. So this is again a future of ophthalmology, which I would wanted to take you. Now, more important is teleophthalmology. I think one of my colleagues will be talking about it. But what is important in teleophthalmology is that you must be able to provide quality of care. The liability should be limited. The security should be taken care. The quality of images you upload should be good, and it improves your workflow. This is what you get within 1 hour. You walk into a mall, you sit in front of the machine, swipe your card, it takes all the data. It gives you a fundus image, it gives you the OCT image, it gives you the glaucoma workup, and all this is available to a patient within 24 hours, and even your billing is done directly to your card. So this is what is GlobeCheck, already in vogue. Topcon has built up this machine and it's already been used. Lastly, I would like to talk about these 3 things which you should understand. What is AI, machine learning, and deep learning? Regular screening is key to prevent blindness. We all appreciate that. We have shortage of doctors. 50% of the patient lose vision before in diagnosis. And a survey was done. And this survey is something which is eye-opener for us, that a diabetic retinopathy patients were examined by the machines and by the doctors. And this particular thing has resulted into, this is what is done. You drag the image into this machine, and within seconds, the machine diagnoses it to be a background diabetic retinopathy or whatever, and gives a grade. Now, this was compared between doctors and this thing. And to my surprise, the AI gave better repeatability or better confirmation by 0.95 as compared to doctors at 0.99. So this is what I'm trying to tell you, is the future of ophthalmology, the digital imaging. And these three, this is my last slide, where any technique which enables computer to mimic human behavior is artificial intelligence. All AI techniques that give computer ability to learn and improve itself without being explicitly programmed to do so is machine learning. And deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which makes the combination of multiple neural network feasible. So with this, I think this is the future. A patient is going to come to you that he'll start asking, do you have digital platform? If you don't have, probably then the patient will look at somebody else. And this will finish my 10 minutes. Thank you so much. And now I have a pleasant duty to invite my next speaker, a very pretty cornea refractive surgeon from Nagpur, Palak Kusumkar. She's like a daughter to me, so I can call her that. And she has done her MS from Manipal. And she has done fellowship in cornea and refractive surgery from Narayan Netralaya. And she has won Best Paper Awards from a lot of places. And I am stopping sharing my things, including ASCRS. So Palak, are you okay? Can I expect you to start? Because I wanted to finish in 10 minutes so that Palak.
Thank you for that.
So
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
You are.
Yeah, thank you for that kind introduction, sir. I would share my screen and
त्यावेळेला इकडे येऊन जाशील मी जेव्हा अजून वेळ आहे माझं सगळ्यात शेवटी आहे.
I know, but you keep yourself muted, huh? Anand. I can hear you what you're saying.
Oh.
Okay, Palak, over to you. EMR.
thank you, sir. So my topic for today is electronic medical record. So as we all know, the medical is towards the advancement, as sir has rightly given the introductory talk on how the medicine is advancing. So I would say it is not only advancing in terms of diagnostic procedure and pharmaceutical areas, but also in organization of the data. And that is where the role of electronic medical record comes. It is a better organization of data, which is not only for the doctors, but also for the patients. So in my talk, I would be running you through what exactly is EMR, why do we need it, what are the different types of EMR available to us, which would be best for our use, what is the scope of application of this EMR, and the role of EMR in our ophthalmological practice. So before I start my talk, I would like opinion from all of you that where do you lie among all these categories? Whether you are using EMR and you find it better than the paper records, or you are using EMR but you think paper records were better, you have still not started using it but plan to start, and you don't think that EMR is useful. So what is EMR? It is a digital version of patient-specific medical information. In previous days, all this was kept and recorded in paper charts, but nowadays, now we are moving towards digitalization. So all this is stored on an electronic medical record system. This includes everything which you could have and probably more than what could have been on paper, including demographics, medical history, all the medications, radiological images, and billing information too. Now, why EMR? Previously, when the records were kept on paper, it was not only cumbersome to record them and save them, but it occupies a lot of space, and also a small mishap in the hospital could lead to losing of huge data. Like a small fire or displacement of the papers leads to losing the data. So that is why the organization has advanced, and it is moving towards saving all this data on your cloud or on your computers. The benefits of this EMR is it helps us record all the history, the examination findings, and helps us track the data of the patient. It gives a professional makeover to the clinic. It helps you organize the clinic and its operations better. In bigger setups, it is usually associated with radiological and the laboratory reports. And one of the most important features of this EMR is audit and research. And also, it is patient privacy protection systems are there. and it cannot be easily hacked by anyone. The government of India is also recognizing the importance of EMR, and it has released guidelines to standardize medical record storage. Now, what are the different types of EMR? Typically in India, the different setups under which a doctor works is a single single doctor setup where the doctor is there with a single receptionist, and maybe his clinic is associated with some laboratory, or there are multiple doctors working in a standalone hospital, or the doctor himself moves or shifts from one hospital to another, or a hospital which is a bigger one and has many chains. So different types of EMR which are available is window-based, web-based, or app-based. So basically window-based EMRs are useful for a single doctor or a standalone hospital where multiple doctors are working. This particular EMR system is installed on your computer and can be used on any laptop or computer having internet access inside that hospital only, and you cannot take this software outside that building. Now next is web-based web-based EMR, which is particularly used for doctors who shift from one hospital to another. So basically they can use this software anywhere in any hospital wherever internet accessibility is there. App-based EMR are a step ahead where the apps are available for the particular EMR software and they can be downloaded on the mobile. So even the patient can download these apps and doctor can feed all the data and patient can connect to the doctor remotely even when the doctor is not available. Now, what should you expect from EMR system which you are planning to install in your hospital? It should help you in billing and help you organize the flow of your patients. The EMR learning system should be very fast and you should have accessibility to various templates which you can use on your system. Patient record management and reviewing of images, reports, all these should be available. And also management of optical shop or pharmacy should be there on your EMR software. Now, various application scope of this EMR starts from billing with organized flow. So when the patient enters your hospital and comes to the reception desk, the first thing he gets registered, and with this system, the patient can get SMS and also know his appointment time. He can book laboratory tests and also other diagnostic investigations or procedures which he wants to do. Now comes to the outpatient part of the EMR. So before the patient walks into doctor's cabin, this software helps us to know, the doctors to know, that what is the patient past history, which patient are we going to see next, and all the data of the patient, including the images and the laboratory reports, are available on the software. Now, how does it make a job of doctor easier? When the doctor is examining the patient, there are few diseases which have typical sets of findings and typical tests which need to be ordered. Like if we see a patient of cataract and we need to order cataract surgery, a physician fitness, a pre-op laboratory workup of blood sugars, HIV, HbS, Ag, all these are typical things which every patient would need. So the templates on EMR system basically saves your energy and time of typing these again and again. So if you have a template, at one click, all the things are filled in that, and also the mistakes are lesser. You do not tend to forget any small test which you would have otherwise if it was written on a paper and you had to write it every time. Also, when you order the test, before the patient is coming to you for the review, you already have the reports and you know what is the plan for this patient. So it makes your examination, your decision quicker and more accurate. Also, the EMR software has drawing application. So it is very useful for us as an ophthalmologist when we want to note down findings of corneal lesions or retinal lesions. It helps us to document it, and also on follow-up, we can know that what was the exact size, shape, and kind of lesion in the past when the patient had come. Also, it has a IP inpatient sector where you can fill details like physician fitness or the surgery notes or the procedure notes which you have done, or allergy to any drugs. Like if the patient is allergic to tropicamide or anything, It can be noted and it will be helpful when the patient comes next time. Now, scan application. The EMR software has facility where you can scan and upload the old manual records which the patient has, or the other records which the patient carries from other hospitals, or the referral letters which the patient has got. Such attitude or such maintenance of record is very helpful when a patient has chronic disease. So from the beginning, you know where you had started seeing the patient and how is the patient progressing. Also in bigger hospital, the EMR system linked with PACS, which is picture archiving and communication system, where the radiological images can be directly viewed on your system and you need not every time go to the radiology department and see the images. Now, one of the most important features of this EMR is audit and research. It is not only clinical audit, but also laboratory and billing audits. So you can know which was a good period of your OPD, which was a lack period, what particular kind of patients are coming in which particular season or time. And also the medical audit, it helps you to know how patients are responding to your new drug if you have used, or any new protocol, treatment protocol which you have introduced in your practice.
Palak,
Now,
stretching the time, please.
Yes, sir. I'll just finish last 2 slides. Now, one of the important feature of this EMR is the data security. It is secured at various levels. There are various safeguards which helps us to have patient record privacy, and not anyone can hack the data. For ophthalmologists, this EMR particularly comes into role when we are looking at chronic diseases, the diseases which have multi-system involvement, and diseases having various ophthalmic subspecialties involved, where opinions of different doctors can be viewed at a same time and you can take a comprehensive decision. There are various EMR providers and you can customize the software which you want on your computer and take the best which is useful for your practice. So in summary, EMR is a good tool to improve patient care and establish an impressive practice. EMR particularly selected to fulfill your needs is the most useful one. It can save time, space, paper, and reduce error. And EMR is the need of the hour, where medical legal issues are cropping up and are in vogue for the doctors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Palak. You will be introducing the next speaker. I'd just like to add one line that every EMR should have a backup every day, because if you do not have that backup, probably that is one thing which one should take into consideration. Yes, Palak, you can introduce the next speaker, who is Samir Gade.
Thank you, sir. So our next speaker is Dr. Samir Gade. He is a practicing ophthalmologist from Nagpur, and he has completed his post-graduation and fellowship from HV Desai, Pune. He would be speaking on the next topic, which is search engine optimization. Over to you, Samir.
Samir, you can start. You can exit. That's it. Great.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, please do that. Palak, you can. That's great.
So good afternoon. I would be speaking on search engine optimization. So basically what we'll be discussing is what is search engine optimization and the various aspects about it. So basically what is SEO? SEO stands for search engine optimization. It is basically the process of getting traffic from the organic free online search results onto your web page. So why do we need SEO? It basically ensures that our site is accessible to a search engine, and we can improve the chances of that a site will be found more on the Google search result. Just to give an example, whenever we are searching for anything on Google, very rarely we find ourselves logging on to the second or third page of the search results of Google. So we need to make sure that our website, if anybody searches for us, is viewed instantly in front of a, let's say, Google search result. That is basically the need of SEO. So as we can see from this data over here, Google has the massive market share in the entire SEO thing. So Yahoo, Bing, and others have basically really don't count. So here is a list of a lot of SEO tools that you can see. These are basically free tools you can teach yourself. They are very readily available on the internet, and they are very quick and easy to learn. So what we can see over here, the green box, as we can see, it's basically the organic. So this is what we're trying to tap. And what we can see on the blue box is the paid research. We search for something, we see some advertisements and all. This is all paid thing. So if you want to spend a lot of money, you can make yourself feature on this side. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, you have to do a little bit of efforts, and you can get those things done. So a lot of techniques and strategies for SEO is you have to make sure you have a good website, it is functioning nicely. You need to have very nice landing pages. You need to make sure your website is very nicely optimized and it is very mobile friendly. You need to have a lot of infographics. A lot of target keywords are also very necessary. So what is the advantage? Advantage is you can basically create a brand for yourself. You can increase the site usability. It's quite cost effective. The return on investment is practically many folds, and eventually it's increased traffic. So disadvantages, it can be costly, and you also get noticed by a lot of people who are not your target audience. So just to summarize, search and SEO is basically a little hard and tedious job. There are a lot of pieces together that you have to piece together, but it is not impossible. Utterly impossible. I think this is the need for the hour for all any kind of person who's trying to set up a new practice, because you want to have that much of people driving down to your OPD. There should be a lot of online traffic that you can convert into as footfalls to your clinic. So just to give you a very small, very nice 5 tips about SEOs, you need to know what your local keywords are. I mean, by what keywords people are searching for things is related to ophthalmology. It can be a word as ophthalmology, it can be a word as clinic, contact lenses, glaucoma, whatever services you're providing. So make sure whatever your website are, you need to make sure all these words are very much visible in your website or your web page. Also, you should make sure that your business is located at the geographical location where you have your, I mean, so Google already knows where your business is, but if you're not writing your address correctly, it's not going to fit properly in the algorithm, and things would not work out nicely. Third tip, you need to make sure basically how many people you're competing with in and around your area. So basically you log on to their web pages, see what they're lacking, and basically exploit whatever you can. So also you need to make sure that you can you submit your website to a lot of local pages like Google Places, Google Maps. Then there are Yahoo pages, Bing pages, local directories in and around your areas that will eventually generate attraction to your business. And make sure to fill all the empty spaces there are. Your name should be there, your address should be there, there should be a lot of photos. You should keep on posting content, Happy New Year messages, and all these things, etc. Basically, drive up traffic to your web page. So this is just an example that I'm sharing with you. This is our setups web page, a Google My Business thing. As we can see, there are 2,000 people who basically landed on our web page by doing nothing. So if this is an enormous number of footfalls that you can convert them as walk-in patients into your clinic. So this is something that everybody needs to learn to tap. There are a lot of consulting services who charge you a bomb for all these services. There are subscription models. They charge anywhere from 10,000 a month to upwards of 50,000. Or you can do a little bit of efforts and get this done by yourself. That's just about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Samir. A great presentation. I just wanted to ask you one question before I go to the
Yes, sir.
Is it coming into the ambit of advertising? Because that's something where our Hippocratic oath prevents us. So are we transgressing this area where it is an advertising through local media? You can't deny that.
It's basically, sir, a very gray area, because if I'm paying any service to do this, so if for example, retail engages somebody else's.
No, agreed. We cannot disown the content, and some content may be quoted against you. So that is where I was asking. Anyway, I think the gray area, so let it be there. I'll ask you to introduce the next speaker, which is Viral.
So next up, we have Dr. Viral Shah with us. Dr. Viral is the director of Niyakshi Eye Care. Dr. Viral Shah is the chairman of Scientific Committee of VOS. He's the member of Scientific Committee of MOS. He is the past president of Ophthalmic Society Nagpur. Sir has over 12 years of experience in teaching of various medical colleges and institutions over the years. And Sir will be speaking upon various digital avenues for mass awareness and health education. Over to you, Sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samir, for such a nice introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Prashant Agnihotri, sir, for conceptualizing such a beautiful session for all the delegates. I would like to acknowledge the presence of my mentors, Dr. Agnihotri sir, Dr. Pangarkar sir, and Dr. Gade sir, and my dear friends, Dr. Samir Gade and Dr. Pallak. Thank you to the Scientific Committee of All India Ophthalmological Society, especially Partha sir, and all the governing council members of All India Ophthalmological Society for giving us this opportunity. So digital avenues for mass awareness and health education, that will be my topic for today. So I will be speaking on why and about how you go about doing this health education and mass awareness, and why you should do it, and what areas you should do it. And our next speaker, Dr. Anaga Harur madam, she will be covering the various social media platforms on which you can do this activities. So why go for the basic question? Always, if you find the answer to why, you will get the answer to how. एक बार पता चल गया क्यों करना है, तो आप कैसे करना है पता कर ही लोगे. क्यों करना है? पॉजिटिव चेंज इन द सोसाइटी, image building for your hospital, clinic, or yourself as a doctor, and a sense of fulfillment of doing your bit in enriching the world around us. The next question is health awareness to karna hai, but why go for digital avenues? Digital media is one of the most important and powerful social tool. It has a wide reach and access. It is highly influential. Across the globe, digital health promotion activities are now recognized to have tremendous influence on health behavior of the target audience. Digital media play a crucial role in the disseminating health information and increasing awareness about health education. It informs and educates people over a period of time. It ultimately helps in change of attitude and behavior of audience. So it is over a period of time. So once you make a video or a brochure or a pamphlet or a flyer or anything related to health education, and you put it on digital media, it will be there for endless time till you delete it from there. So people can go over temporarily anywhere after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and get their knowledge, belief, and attitudes changed according to the your teachings. Health education, as we all know, is an interdisciplinary social science that draws from many disciplines with an objective of providing information and instructing individuals, groups, and communities to achieve and maintain better health. Communications. Health education is defined as consciously constructed opportunities for learning involving some forms of communication techniques. So it's all about communication techniques, and we all know the best and the most powerful communication techniques nowadays are digital media. The WHO also defines it as dissemination of health related information. So we have to disseminate it and inspire and motivate the population to take the necessary action, improve health and mental healthy behavior and lifestyle. So what are the advantages for digital avenues? It motivates a large number of people simultaneously, which is a very Herculean task. It plays a central role in informing and educating people about important events and changes happening around the world, especially because it connects the audience to the digital world beyond their immediate reach. So even in sitting in Nagpur, I can connect with someone from Delhi or New York or Paris or Australia, anywhere with this digital media, and I can propagate my views. It brings the world closer to the audience and increases their reach and access. Digital media is one such institution which has the ability to and a potential to influence every individual way. We can very well see that digital media has the ability to change our culture, behavior, and it can affect our thinking. Today's world is, as we all know, it's a digital gadget-driven world. We all have a mobile in our hand, an iPad or a TV or a computer or a laptop connected online 24/7. In today's technology-driven world, we are surrounded by these technological gadgets. When we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is search for our mobile under the pillow or near the table or wherever. That is the first thing you look in that for, even for the time from your mobile phones. You get the latest news and on your mobiles or tabs during commuting to office, while reaching your hospitals or your offices. The first thing you do is log into your laptop or your desktop and see your daily mails and updates, social media updates. In the evening, when we reach home, we reach for our the digital gadgets for entertainment, chatting, social media updates, or any other purpose. Even in washroom, many people use mobile and tablet to get connected. So in today's scenario, an individual spends more time on these digital gadgets than he does sleeping or for his work or business. Moreover, advertising has shifted a large part to this social media platforms and digital platforms. And we can see any site you go, advertisement will pop up. So it's a very, very important and powerful tool, whether it be for entertainment, information, or advertisement. There are various digital avenues that you can tap for this health awareness and health education and mass awareness, be it Google, WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, many are there. And I think Dr. Anaga Herur in the next talk, she will be covering this in details. What is the health, what is the scope of health awareness that you should focus on? So there are many, but the bottom three, as you can see, these are the area of focus for us: disease awareness, disease prevention and control, and uses of health services. What are the types of various digital education initiatives that you should undertake? It can be a general health initiatives like importance of eye care, primary eye care in children, school health, or it can be a subspecialty related like cornea, corneal blindness, LASIK, refractive surgeries, diabetic retinopathies, AMD, RD for a retina specialist, for pediatric ophthalmologist, squint or amblyopia, for anterior segment surgeons, dry eyes, CVS, digital eye strain, for glaucoma specialists, various glaucoma awareness initiatives they can undertake. It can be events related. You can make awareness related to eye care during Diwali, eye care during Holi festival, cornea donation fortnight, World Sight Day, glaucoma. The list is endless. You can manipulate it as you want. It can be occupation related. Like if you are working in an industrial area, you can do for industrial trauma, sports eye injury, driver's technician, digital eye strain, computer vision syndrome again. Then it can be related to your services being offered by your hospital or by you as a doctor. It can be related to a new center opened, shifting to newer premises, upgrading to our upgradation of existing premises, new faculties or doctors being added to your setup, new equipment being installed, or some breakthrough technology that you are recently incorporated. So digital media has the power to change the world, and it is changing the world. It has wide reach and influence. There are no geographical or political boundaries that can withhold this digital media from penetrating to your target audience. With this digital media are intensely employed in health education programs, and research has conclusively shown that with the right mix of message, it has the potential to produce behavior change among the target population. It is an omnipresent, everywhere it is present, and it involves two of your most powerful senses, that is eyes and ears simultaneously. And media spreads awareness about health. Media is an important tool for health communication. It is the most effective media for health communication, and media plays an important role in spreading health education. These are the 4 conclusions by various studies that have been taken up and published worldwide. So in conclusion, digital media spreads awareness. It's already covered. So these are my references, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I think our next speaker is now
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Anaga Herur. She has not joined yet, so,
I think we will
go with Dr. Gade, sir.
Wait for her to join. Meanwhile, if you can introduce Anand Gade or
Dr. Anand Gade, as we all know, is one of the senior most ophthalmologists of our Central India. He has more than 34 years of experience in ophthalmology and practice, and he just loves digital technology. He has delivered many lectures over many ophthalmic conferences, and he also conducted vast courses for toric IOLs. He's going to speak about teleophthalmology. As we all know, application of available information technology tools to deliver possible ophthalmic services to the patient sitting away from the ophthalmologist is teleophthalmology. So welcome, Dr. Anand Gade, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ural. Thank you very much for your kind words. And thank you very much, EIVS, Dr. Prashant sir, for making me the part of this wonderful IC. And the word teleophthalmology, actually, it is derived from the telemedicine. And the telemedicine is pretty old. In the year 1870, when the telephone was invented, there are two articles in the Journal of Lancet and Science Direct. The two doctors, they claim that physician sitting at a distance can help the patient by listening the patient's heart and lung sound. So that was the actually initial telemedicine. And over a period of time, then different refinements are coming up. So now teleophthalmology, and what World Health Organization says about the telemedicine, it is actually delivery of the health related services when the distance is a critical factor, by employing all the latest tools of the information technology to exchange the valid information so that we can make diagnose, treat, and prevention of the disease. This is the actually telemedicine. And this teleophthalmology, why we are actually trying from the last many years, but actually this is a pandemic which has given boost to the teleophthalmology. Number one factor was that everybody wanted to save from to be saved from the pandemic. And so except whatever the ultimate we had some obstacle in between, mental obstruction, everything was gone and acceptance came up very fast. And we have to adopt teleophthalmology because the number of ophthalmologists in our countries are from different surveys, from varying from 9 to 14 per million population, whereas in the USA and other countries, the number of ophthalmologists per million population are from 60 to 80. So our number is very less, plus most of the ophthalmologists, they are located in the urban areas. So to take the ophthalmology to the remote area, teleophthalmology is the best tool. And we are gifted branch of medicine in the sense that lot can be delivered, services can be delivered by studying the ophthalmic images. So in what way we can deliver the teleophthalmology? It can be synchronous. Synchronous teleophthalmology, when the doctor and the patients are live at the same time, they are looking and talking each other. It's a wonderful tool, but at the same time, it is open for the online abuse from the both sides. Second way we can deliver is the asynchronous, when the images are uploaded and sent to a concerned doctor, and doctor, as per their convenient time, they study the images and treatment is advised. One more may be the combination of both. Once we study the images and bring and talk to the patient online. Third, after these three things, one more important device has come in the market, that is smartphone, the WhatsApp. It has got all these three things. Here we can exchange the text messages, images, video, anything is possible. Everything is possible. So what are the avenues and what are the, I should say that applications of teleophthalmology? Number one is primary basic consultation. I hope that each and every ophthalmologist or most of the patients, they have utilized this basic consultation during this pandemic time, and at least something was delivered. Next is most important aspect for the small hospital or a single doctor is counseling for the surgery. Patient come to surgery, just you diagnose whatever, recommend the surgery, ask them to go back and talk to you online whenever they have time, so that counseling session can be shifted online. Then important avenue may be the follow-up. Once you have operated upon the case and the patient do not have any complaint, no complication, then we can visit or talk to patient online itself through synchronous teleophthalmology. One more is when we need to have a second opinion from our colleague or from other specialist, same time that we can bring in them online. Then there are two more aspects, the diabetic retinopathy and the glaucoma. Actually, these are the two important diseases which about into this area, services in these two areas being delivered by some charitable hospitals from a very long time. And good thing is that about the specificity and accuracy of these images and in this field of diabetic glaucoma is somewhere more than 95%. What are the advantages of teleophthalmology? There is actually no geographical boundary of your services. Wherever internet is available, we can take our geographical, we can take our services there. Patient saves a lot. They need not to travel to the hospital every time, or maybe their frequency may cut down. So suppose you operated, they come for one's operation and most of the follow-up visit, they can cut down. Then doctor saves a lot because now most of that work time you have shifted online as per your convenience. So remaining time is utilized for some more constructive work. Hospital again, they are benefit in the sense that when the only basically they are making the triage. The only needed patient who need the procedure, who need some other services, only they come to the hospital. Optimum utilization of the whatever resources that we are carrying out. And of course, each and every must protected from the infection. There's an infection protection available to both sides. But there are certain issues with the teleophthalmology. Number one, you need a very high-speed internet. And fortunately now, India nowadays has got there's no problem with actually high-speed internet. But mostly the doctor-patient relationship is at stake. When patient comes to us in the OPD, then after some talking, then when the rapport is formed and that patient's faith in the doctor or we trust the patient, this rapport is very difficult to form in online or maybe teleophthalmology. A legal aspect may come up. Dr. Viral knows much more about it. He is a very medical legal expert in all over, known for his knowledge all over India, ophthalmic circle. That consent. If teleophthalmology is initiated from the patient side, then no consent is required. But if teleophthalmology is initiated from the physician side, that is for either follow-up cases or counseling, then probably we need some consent. That consent may be either verbal or maybe video can record it, or earlier patient can send us email also, a form which we send to the patient and they return us. Then thing is, we have to follow certain government rules also. Like what Dr. Prashant sir was saying, that certain areas, gray area, yes, they may come here and in teleophthalmology also. Teleophthalmology is very demanding in terms of investment and you need trained staff. Suppose you are running a eye care hospital and you need to establish one satellite center, then calculate the cost of all those high gadget instruments and then the running it with the trained staff, it goes up many folds. Or if you don't want to establish satellite hospital, then next option available to is have all this equipment installed into a mobile van. But when you take all this equipments into a mobile van, your wear and tear will be very, very high. So we are in for this investment will be a big hindrance into delivering teleophthalmology. Privacy and confidentiality, yes, privacy is both ends. It should be maintained and it has to be, we have to look for that. And then whenever we deliver this high investment, we are delivering these services, so definitely some sustainable charges or services is required. To conclude, teleophthalmology is required to take it to the remote area. But at the same time, we cannot invest as a single doctor, a small hospital. We cannot bring so that much investment. So you have to take some baby steps. Number one baby step may be adaptation of some application. Some apps are available in the market with patient while book the appointment. They can register their complaints or maybe allergy. So much of that time, whatever recorded in our clinic, that is saved. And what our earlier speakers, they have enumerated, like ophthalmic education online, our EMR, and the optimization of your search engine. If we combine all this together, then definitely that day is not far away that anybody can make the virtual training by in a hybrid manner. That means, you know, that at least one visit is required and most of the thing can be done on the through teleophthalmology. So our catch line should be the, instead of 100% classical teleophthalmology, it should be the conventional ophthalmology hybrid model. So with this, I end my
Sure.
talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anant. I just have one query.
Sir.
We had recently heard in the media that Sushant Singh Rajput was fed with the drug sent through teleophthalmology. And then there was some, legal issues that should not be done. So is there a criterion of drugs which should not be prescribed in teleophthalmology?
Sir,
And the second thing is that what is the emotional factor? Because every time you see a patient, you talk to him in front is different. Because a lot of people say that we'd like to see you in spite of being, counseled on teleophthalmology. So 2 points, and then we go to the next speaker.
Sir, this is very important because earlier I mentioned that rapport between a patient and doctor is very important, paramount important. That here we are missing. At least something can be restored by the synchronous teleophthalmology. At least we are watching on or listening to them. That criteria is not fulfilled through the asynchronous teleophthalmology. And next issue of what medication we should prescribe, what we should not. So there is one rule of thumb is try to avoid, at least in our ophthalmology, steroid or any mediatic, really, because we are not looking at the patients. There are certain limitations of ophthalmology.
Sure.
So angle.
I know you rightly said, Anant, you rightly said. Thank you so much. You made it so well. Viral, are you ready with the introduction of the next speaker? Because Anaga is just there.
Yes, sir.
Over to Viral.
I will go ahead. Yeah. So our next talk is on social media platforms. Social media, as we all know, are interactive technologies that allow the creation and sharing or exchange of information, ideas, career interests, and other forms of expressions via virtual communities and networks. Social media platforms can help to improve an individual's sense of connectedness with real or online communications and can be an effective communication or marketing tool for us as ophthalmologist entrepreneurs. We shall be, and to give a brief overview of this, we have none other than our own West Zone ARC representative on AIOS, Dr. Anaga Herur, Madam. Dr. Anaga Herur is a medical director of Anil Eye Hospital, Mumbai since last 25 years. She is recipient of many awards and has had many national and international presentations and live surgeries to her credit. Welcome, Dr. Anaga, Madam. We know you are busy and juggling between 2 sessions. So without taking much time, you can start your presentation, Madam.
Viral, I would like to add this dynamic, versatile personality. She's not only a great ophthalmologist, but she's also a great poet. You have to listen to her poetry, and then she is an accomplished Bharatnatyam dancer. Anaga, we are proud of you. Let the
one more aspect of her is she's a great interviewer, sir. And I think
I know her.
Oprah Winfrey has a competition in India.
You would require a full session to talk about Anaga, but Anaga, we look forward to your presentation. And your smile tells all that you're all ready for it. Okay, Anaga.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Prashant Agnihotri, sir, Dr. Pangarkar, sir, for involving me in this IC. And it's been really so many days since we have all met in a physical conference. And today we have a great opportunity to meet online here in a virtual conference. And sorry to join in late and sorry to butt in like this. Yes. So I would be speaking to you all on social media platforms. Yes. Is my slide visible?
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely.
Yeah. So friends, digital vision, the future is here. And you have amazing kinds of social media networks today available, which are media sharing platforms. You can have discussions on them. There are content curation networks with customer reviews, a lot of blogging and publishing going on, and so much more. So let's take them one by one. So let's speak about Facebook first. So this was basically the brainchild of Mark Zuckerberg in 2004 when it was introduced. And it has a whopping 2.6 billion monthly active users. Now, why this is important to us is because this is the extent and the enormity of its presence, and we need to be aware of this when we think about posting our posts in these social media platforms. So Facebook is the leading social platform, reaching almost 60% of all the internet users, and it has more than 80 million small businesses around the world which is using Facebook pages. Remember one thing, friends, it's not just through our PCs or through the laptops. 96% of active Facebook users actually use mobile devices. So whatever we do, we should also make it mobile friendly. And as just been said, that it's an average of 58.5 minutes on social media platform that is being spent each day. Now, this definitely depends from person to person, but basically the people who are internet savvy are usually hooked on to Facebook, and at least once a day would go and visit Facebook. So there are 4 new petabytes of data added every day, 4 million likes every minute. So there's huge potential which we need to tap, and 350 million photos per day. So there is a lot that you can do on Facebook, not only just text, but you can add videos and Facebook Live. Now, Facebook Live is something that is really catching up. We have done a lot of Facebook Live activities from our institute also. And this is catching up because people really want to ask questions and get in immediate answers. And then you can have very short talks on Facebook Live and make it very interesting. So there's a huge reach. You can have a lot of posts. There can be organic boosting also, along with organic increase in your Facebook subscribers. It could be made viral, and also there are paid options. So what is important is you need to post relevant content, post often at different times of the day. Yes, there are agencies who do it and they have a lot of logic behind it. What time of the day is usually good to in order to post these Facebook contents? And also you can post facts and also expert opinions. It's a lot of things that you can do to keep customers engaged. Now, how you can get your spotlight is by actually knowing. So the audiences on Facebook is usually between 35 to 65, but now finally this is really going to extend both ways. They're usually here to browse and to know more things about what are the posts that are being posted. It's not really a sales oriented platform, but it can be used for branding yourself. There's a huge population that is there on Facebook. It's a great platform to have awareness creatives. Like, for example, when we did our Glockathon, or when we did a promotion of the usually that we have the World Donation Day. So all these are usually platforms that you can use to promote the activities that you do to increase social awareness. So usually it needs around 3 to 4 posts per week to keep the page active. So how we optimize in our institute is we post around 2 to 3 educative posts on specific topics. Like, for example, you have June, that was a cataract month. So you have some topics and some posts on that. Or you can have informative posts on the services that you provide so that people are made aware. You can also optimize it here when we are using special activities, like, for example, certain challenges that you can give them, an eye challenge. This can help to keep the engagement rate high. Also, you do certain posts to clear the myths. Like, for example, there are a lot of people who may not know the differences between Moti Bindu and Kach Bindu, or you can have myths like whether cataracts come back, whether what are the kinds of surgery. So all these things you can do on Facebook. Now, coming to Instagram, this is basically owned also by Facebook, and it's an American photo and video sharing social networking device. 1 billion people use Instagram every month. 500 million using Instagram stories every day. Almost 63% users logging in at least once per day, both men and women, for people spending on an average of 28 minutes per minute on Instagram, and 200 million users visiting at least one business profile per day. So basically, this is also increasing in its potential. Some of these brands post an average of 2.5 stories per week. The audiences here are much younger, so from the age group of 18 to 40. So my kids will be using Instagram much more than me. In fact, when I started all this, I didn't know much about it at all, and it was my son who actually introduced me to all this. More of pictures here, small quick animations usually are more popular. This is basically the new generation app. There are more of action takers. You can also use it as a platform to book consultations and raise inquiries, and it usually needs around 4 to 5 posts a week to keep a handle engaging. So how we optimize it in our institute is we usually make it a point to use it as an educational module and educate young generations. Again, give quick tips and tricks here, short videos which will help you grab the best attentions. You make it like a story form. That's more attractive than usually just some boring posts. That would help to increase the interaction with followers. And we make our content buckets based on current trends and popular searches. So how you can educate the younger generation is, for example, today you have a lot of online classes. So you can give them tips on how to keep their eyes healthy and how to take care and how to take precautions when they are on the digital devices for a long time. Quick tips and tricks on how to take care during summers or during seasonal variations like in rainy season. Also, you can have small videos like this where they grab the attention, where you use what are the current trends and what are the popular searches. So this will help to improve your following there. You can use photos, stories, tags, short videos, and hashtag. This is the way to go. Now coming to WhatsApp, 2 billion WhatsApp users. This is usually what we use for communicating with our friends and groups, available in more than 180 countries with 60 different languages, 65 billion messages. So a huge potential. Remember one thing, it's best not to forward just forwards that you get, because fake news gets forwarded very soon and this can become a real problem. So what you can do is use either texts, images, videos, even documents, presentations that can be even shared on WhatsApp, and links. Now, how we have used it is you can make WhatsApp groups and broadcast groups, especially now, even during the elections, and even also when we use it for broadcasting our services, then you can have broadcast groups where you have almost 256 people in a group, where the other person does not really know what you are sending to the other person in the group. And this becomes very, very easy to reach out to a lot of people. We are also using it to reach out to our patients. So it will help not only in marketing, but also to the patients. Twitter is something which is used almost like 330 million people using it monthly and 145 million using it daily. It comprises of almost 75% of business to business or B2B, which use Twitter to market their product, and 500 million tweets per day. Basically, it is used by professionals, businesses, CEOs, and corporates. They use it to connect and share information, facts, news, photos, and opinions. Basically, Twitter is a place where you connect, like the celebrity world is where it is used most often. Audiences here are again in the very young age group, 25 to 45. And this is a chance to communicate to the society with your brand, with your thoughts, and you can tweet on trending topics. So here again, you can use it as a platform to improve social awareness and visibility. Like here, when mucormycosis, there was a huge this thing in the community regarding, and a lot of patients having difficulties and having a lot of apprehensions regarding mucormycosis. Here we had a radio interview which we also shared on Twitter. Or when there was this cyclone, you can send a tweet regarding patients being to be safe. So you can also tweet on trending topics and share your opinions. Now, LinkedIn is something which was a American business and employment oriented service, 65 plus million monthly active users. It's mostly used among Fortune 500 companies and 30 million companies on LinkedIn. We are also using it, but it is a more evolving platform. It might take a little longer for us to actually know the exact extent to how it is being used. Now, YouTube is something which is very, very vibrant because it is a video-based channel. So there are 2 billion logged in monthly users, 500 hours of video being uploaded every minute. So for us as ophthalmologists, we can upload our videos on YouTube, not only for ophthalmologists, but also for the general public. Almost 70% of YouTube views on mobile devices being used, and consumers with wide ranging age groups. So here you can give a lot of informative content. So you already know that it can be used for entertainment. People use it as for music channels and seeing other informations on other varied range of topics. Basically, there are vlogs. It's a blog with video. So that gives it the vibrancy, and that gives it the direct connect to the patient, where they immediately connect to it and relate to it. So here, how we use it is basically as an educational channel. The audiences here, the range of age is not just to 6 to 40, it's even much higher. It's basically the world of subscribers. So here you can use it not only for pre-consultation, but also post-consultation. Like for example, we have made YouTube videos on dry eye, on cataracts, on LASIK, on diabetic retinopathies. So here patients can easily go through a detailed description of what you want to say in your layman language, so that you directly express what you want to say and directly connect to the patient. So it's a very easy way to communicate and help to share experiences and knowledge. You need to really use around 8 to 10 videos a month to keep subscribers engaging. So these are a lot of, we have created a playlist in our channel based on the indications. And this you can expand depending on how your patients and what the patients really want to know from you. So this was another video that we had on mucormycosis, and it actually went viral. And within just 2 days or 3 days, it reached almost 2,500 views. So these are basically information and videos that the patients watch, and you can get an organic reach on Google. Also, you can put educational material, and you can reduce the unwanted questions that you get from the patients when they are in the OPD. So you can just share a link with them, and this immediately they can get all the answers to their questions. Now, Google is basically the searching world. You have everybody today searching on Google. So this is a world of reviews, of direction guides, and blogging. There's a great visibility for patients looking for services. These reviews will actually add the extra miles to your brand, but it can also work the other way around. So you need to be extremely careful, because reviews can also be negative. So you need to give really good service and be very, very careful regarding how you handle your patients. Now, whenever you have the SEO, you need to see that visibility on your first page, which makes a difference to your patients. So what also helps is sharing happy patient feedbacks, not only on Google reviews, but also this improves your Google rating. So there are easy ways to get locations. So you can also have Google map links for your patients, and a lot of postings that you can do. So these are some of the Google reviews that we had, and activities like hospital timings and records keep the patients updated about their busy hours also in the hospital. Also, the blogging that you do, you can have different kinds of topics. Like here we have had myopia in children. So these are all the various things that you can do with all the social media platforms. But remember, friends, you need to understand what exactly you want to do, because you need to identify your audience. You need to identify the geography where you want to reach them, and what is your goal, and how you use each of these social media platforms is important. Like, for example, Facebook is best for improving your brand loyalty, whereas Twitter could be good for public relations, and YouTube will directly connect to the patient regarding the work that you do. So social media, friends, is very important. At the same time, it could be good, bad, and ugly. So you have to be extremely careful as to how you handle them. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Anaga. An excellent presentation, a very balanced view of all the medias and how you're using it. Your information will go a long way in educating our own colleagues. Now I'll request Anant to introduce Anand Pangarkar. Anand,
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are you going off, or you're being with us?
Yes, sir. I have my own. I see.
Wish all the best.
Thank you so much, everyone. Sorry to leave.
Yeah. Please put your presentation in one of the media so we can actually keep listening.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Anaga.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
God bless you.
Thank you so much.
And wish you all the best for your new premises. God bless.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, over to Anand. Anand, can you take it from here? And
Dr. Anand Pangarkar is a very, very senior vitreoretinal surgeon from the Central India. He was a gold medalist in MS. But at the same time, an important thing is he was a very ferocious and very commanding student leader also. So you see the two things into one: gold medalist and ferocious student leader into one. Yes, his views are very much accepted. and he loves teaching. He's a professor in medical college. And with this, I welcome Dr. Pakarkar, sir. Over to you, sir.
Anand, please log in. Yeah. Hello, yes, you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Anand, for some good words.
Ferocious words.
Anand sir, yeah, Anand, if you switch off the virtual background, you will be visible. Just switch off the virtual background. You are not visible. Your video is not visible.
Your video is come now. I mean, your presentation is come. So you can.
Right.
But he is not visible to the audience.
We are trying.
Yeah.
And we have 5 minutes. Palak, could you just compile any questions in the chat box? Palak, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Please
Sure.
compile, and I leave it to you to finish off if there are some important questions remain unanswered.
Sure.
And
Yes.
Anand, please go ahead. Don't worry about your face. We can still.
You know my face. Yeah.
Go ahead with the presentation. We have 15 minutes, 10 minutes for you, 5 minutes for rest of the things.
Friends, we have been through a great tour of the digital world by the eminent faculty so far. For the past few minutes, we have been living in a virtual world.
Sure.
Let me please have the privilege of bringing you back to the real world. And what is it that brings us to the real world? It's a magical 6-letter word, ethics. In the next few minutes, I'm going to perhaps help you being ethical ophthalmologists in this digital world.
Some hiccups.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
Wait. You're on.
A few centuries ago, when medicine was all about secrecies and magics and mystics, it was Hippocrates. We all know him as an eminent physician and philosopher from Greece, who brought reasoning, logic, and such things to medicine. And one of these important contributions of Hippocrates was the Oath of Hippocrates, wherein he stated that you owe your duty, certain duties to your patients, and behavior in an ethical manner. In 1803, 2-3 centuries later, it was Thomas Percival, an English physician and philosopher, who published a code of medical ethics describing professional duties and ideal behavior relative to hospital and charities. In 1847, that is 10 years before our first war of independence, the American Medical Association published their code of ethics for doctors to be followed by all those practicing the modern medicine. In the Indian context, we rely on the MCI 2002 regulations, which define many things, and it is a tome one should go through, which includes duties of doctors towards patients, society, research. It also describes the character and conduct a doctor should have, and the unethical acts and the punishment it will beget in case you indulge in them. And an important modification by the MCI has been done on 12/5/2020 regarding telemedicine, allowing the facility of telemedicine to Indian people and by Indian doctors with certain guidelines to be followed in the times of pandemic. Ethics is a 6-letter word. Its dictionary meaning is system of moral principles, character, and conduct. Whereas it is defined as an ability to distinguish between the right and wrong and to act accordingly. Why is it important? Because a doctor is in a unique position where he is in a superior position to treat or cause harm to a patient seeking refuge to him, with him for treatment of his ailment. The Medical Council of India Code of Medical Ethics 2002. Some salient features of this. First is the declaration to be signed by the doctor before getting registered with an oath to abide by the Code of Medical Ethics. Many of us may have forgotten that we have signed this oath and we have under oath to abide by this Code of Medical Ethics. What are the implications of this oath taking? Implication is that you are bound by the oath, and ignorance of the Code of Medical Ethics is not an excuse or defense. The salient features of the Code of Medical Ethics as promulgated by the Medical Council of India in 2002 are duties towards the patient. The prime duty is to render service to the patient, and financial reward is subordinate. I know that this principle is not being followed the way it should be, but it is the present days. Beneficence to the patient shall always be your motto, and malfeasance never. Confidentiality of a patient-doctor communication is extremely important, and you are not supposed to gossip about your patient's condition with other societal members. You are allowed to diverge this confidential information in a court of law under the instructions of a court. Implication of beneficence: be sure about the new drug or the surgical procedure and the beneficiary effect it will have on the patient before advocating it. Confidentiality: sharing of patient data on the world stage has to be done with due care so that you do not disclose the identity of the patient. Some more salient features of the Code of Medical Ethics are proper advice on the matters of public health to authorities and public education. Now, it is under these duties that we are all allowed to indulge in conducting health education via digital media. Implications of these features are reluctance of the experts to add to the guidelines in the pandemic because they were answerable. Talks for lay people: you have to be very sure that there are only facts. There are no tall claims, no false promises, and of course, no patient soliciting. A doctor has certain characters as well. He has to be upright, abreast with the latest knowledge, devoted to patient care and wedded to scientific methods. So therefore, you cannot ask a patient to resort to some unscientific methods which are unsubstantiated. Research, participation in research is encouraged. The unethical acts have been described as no advertising, acceptance of gifts, hospitality, travel, no prenatal sex determination, and no euthanasia. The implications are that you have to be upright. There is no propagation of any procedure under lure or threat. That means a drug company should not be luring you in order to promote their drug. And in terms of research, data privacy and protection is an important consideration. In the pre-internet era, the world was large. For an individual doctor or patient, the world was large. There were multiple closed units of society, city, or nation. And doctors depended on mouth-to-mouth publicity. There was just a few print media exposure opportunities, and trust was the cornerstone of doctor-patient relationship. This trust was established because of the physical contact, because of the coming together, because of the eye contact, and many other things which we had just discussed. And the long association between a family physician and the family members established a familiarity and trust which cannot be obtained with the presence of in the current era of digital world. We came to the television age. TV opened a new vista for doctors to communicate on health and public related issues with a very wide reach as compared to the pre-internet era or pre-TV era. However, what is sometimes forgotten is that the wide reach certainly means more responsibility for the doctors. Every statement has to be very carefully weighed before it is made. These are some of the important milestones in the digital world. Internet made a big world into a small global village. In India, VSNL brought internet in 1995, and now more than 1/3 of the 6-7 billion people of the world are on the internet. Smartphone, Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, Microsoft, Instagram, everything. Dr. Anaga spoke on in quite a few details about all these facilities or avenues, and they have brought people closer and made the world smaller. Important consideration in the use of these technologies. Advertising. Advertising is a lure. Advertising is being done on virtual sites. However, advertisement soliciting patients where a doctor's name appear constitute an unethical practice, and therefore you are liable to be punished by the medical council. Information about the doctor starting a new facility can be advertised. If your clinic, your hospital is on the website, you have a website dedicated, please update it regularly. Incorrect information can be problematic. I can recall the instance where two of my friends were associates and they had a website, and the younger one had put the hospital name, and later when the hospital's address changed, it was not changed, and therefore the senior person took umbrage and matters went to a boil. The fallacy of this important guideline is that all corporate hospitals, without mentioning the name of the doctors, can advertise. So you are at a disadvantage vis-a-vis a corporate hospital. So here I have put an example: hospital for ophthalmic surgery can be advertised. The moment you put your name, you're in trouble. Electronic media exposure. Public health education programs for lay people on any platform also have to follow the same protocol. The ethical parameter is not to solicit patient. Patient's identity is an important thing and gathering more and more importance with each passing day, because the data theft, data sharing, data snatching, everything is on the way. Educational webinars shared by co-professionals also, you have to follow this caution of the images, reports, and all to hide the patient identification like name, age, sex. If you have to profile face photos, obscure some parts. To stipulate that a proper consent from the patient to use his or her data is an important aspect of the consent and applicable to investigation reports, images, and videos. Ethical committee approval is necessary for research. Consent by participation to participate and authority to use the data is also important. So finally, there are some do's and don'ts. Do always insist on correct, true, scientifically established facts. Always maintain patient privacy. Advertisement only for the hospital, no doctor's name. Consent has to be proper consent for care, sharing of data, participation, research. Don'ts: do not promote untruth, unsubstantiated fact. Do not let the patient identifying data be there. Do not associate with advertisements containing doctors' names, and do not forget the patient concern. Take home: many of the morally and legally correct acts are also ethically correct. However, be informed about your duties and responsibilities. Be honest, upright, abreast of latest scientific knowledge, and be aware that any slip up in digital media platform will be like wildfire, because the nature of this technology is wild and reach is widespread, whether it's good or bad, whether it is success or failure. These are my resources, and thank you, friends, for a patient listening.
Thank you so much, Anand. Palak, do we have any question relevant? We can take one question before we close this.
Sir, no questions in particular.
Yeah, but you have
I have certain observations, Prashant.
yeah, and then you give vote of thanks then.
Okay.
Because we have another 2 minutes left with us.
Okay.
Anand?
These observations are, see, you had raised a question of prescription.
Yeah, sir, you can stop sharing the screen so everyone will.
We are trying to do that.
Screen sharing.
12 o'clock red button, yeah.
That's it.
They're done. We are, see, you had raised a question about prescription of certain medicines on telemedicine or teleophthalmology platform. And the MCI guidelines state that certain class of drugs cannot be and should not be prescribed.
Especially psychotropic drugs. And
psychotropic drugs.
You
so that answers that question. And I would just reiterate that use of those social media platforms is a little dicey thing. It's a very good tool.
I think, Anand, you made a point. I just have one thing to say. There is not a level playing field between corporates and individual doctors, which MCI has to look at it, because a doctor working in a corporate setup advertises, and a doctor working in his own personal setup cannot advertise. Anyway, that is about.
And Prashant, your robotic surgery thing,
Yeah, that's
the
coming.
tele-ophthalmology is not allowing two things. First is robotic surgery and distantly located or guided surgical
True.
invasive procedures.
So over to Anand for a brief vote of thanks to all the people.
Yeah, I would start by thanking Dr. Partha and the AIOS for this opportunity. Thank Dr. Prashant, Anant Gade, Samir Gade, Viral Shah, and Anaga Herur for their lovely and beautiful presentations, and to the audience for their kindly and patient listening. Thank